Hello, subscribers. Welcome back to the channel, where we bring you deep insights into international relations and comparative politics. Before we dive into today's analysis, I kindly ask you to subscribe, like this video, set your notifications, and share it with others. Your support is our greatest strength as we strive to provide objective analyses of South Korea's national security and global politics. Part 1. The Politics of Power Concentration and Regime Collapse. One of the most heavily debated questions in modern comparative politics is this: why do nations that once enjoyed relatively stable democratic systems suddenly experience rapid democratic backsliding and find themselves facing political and economic ruin? The systemic crises faced by any nation are always the result of a complex interplay between internal and external variables. Nevertheless, history reveals a consistent and undeniable pattern: regimes come to power, seize control of the military and law enforcement agencies under the guise of legal procedures, neutralize the democratic principle of checks and balances, and ultimately plunge the state into dysfunction. In today's lecture, we will conduct a precise, comparative analysis of representative historical cases and use these insights to soberly diagnose the reality facing South Korea today. Part 2. Historical Case Studies of Power Concentration and Regime Collapse. The Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro regimes Venezuela. After coming to power through democratic elections in 1998, Hugo Chavez purged military generals en masse and placed loyal cronies in key positions. He privatized the military by mandating ideological training and granting them lucrative privileges, including the control of food distribution, reckless industrial nationalization, and populist welfare policies. Could not withstand the crash in global oil prices. Under his successor, Nicolas Maduro, this led to hyperinflation and severe shortages of basic goods, triggering a humanitarian catastrophe that forced millions to flee their homeland. The Fidel Castro regime Cuba. Prior to the revolution, Cuba maintained a close alliance with the United States and enjoyed one of the highest economic standards in Latin America. However, upon taking power in 1959, Fidel Castro completely dismantled the existing regular army, reorganized the military around his guerrilla revolutionary forces, and purged moderates who opposed his dictatorship. Cuba subsequently transformed into a socialist, one-party dictatorship. The combination of a rigid planned economy and long-term U.S. economic sanctions has left the country trapped in chronic economic hardship and severe human rights abuses to this day. The Daniel Ortega regime Nicaragua. Returning to power through democratic elections in 2006, Ortega replaced the leadership of the military and police with political sycophants fiercely loyal to him. When anti-government protests erupted, he deployed not only official state security forces, but also extrajudicial paramilitaries raised by the regime to brutally suppress his own citizens. As a result, the democratic press and opposition parties were completely neutralized, and the electoral system was reduced to a mere tool for extending his rule, a textbook example of the gradual decay of democracy. The Salvador Allende regime Chile. Chile, which boastfully held a long tradition of mature democracy in South America, faced a massive upheaval when the Marxist Salvador Allende took power in 1970. Allende pushed forward radical nationalization of key industries and aggressive land reforms, which triggered severe market distortions and skyrocketing inflation. Society became deeply polarized, leading to daily bloody clashes. Ultimately, having failed to secure the neutrality of the armed forces, his regime met a tragic end with the 1973 military coup, The Evo Morales regime, Bolivia. Taking office in 2006, Morales initially achieved economic growth by nationalizing natural gas. However, he undermined the military's political neutrality by periodically purging its leadership and enforcing anti-imperialist ideological education within the ranks. Later, his aggressive attempts to bypass constitutional term limits, combined with allegations of fraud in the 2019 presidential election, triggered massive national chaos. Morales was ultimately forced into exile, leaving the Bolivian economy with a harsh bill depleted. Foreign exchange reserves. The Ayatollah Khomeini regime, Iran. Prior to the 1979 Islamic Revolution, Iran was a key ally of the United States in the Middle East, receiving full American backing. However, upon establishing a theocracy, Khomeini purged the elites within the existing regular military and created the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, a separate military organization dedicated solely to protecting the regime. Coexisting with the regular armed forces, this organization grew into a massive interest group that seized control of national industries and finance. Today, Iran suffers from chronic economic hardship. Amid extreme theocratic rule and international isolation, the Robert Mugabe regime, Zimbabwe. In the early days of independence in 1980, Zimbabwe was dubbed the breadbasket of Africa due to its rich agricultural productivity. However, seeking to prolong his rule, Mugabe raised personal special forces to brutally suppress opposition forces. In particular, his unplanned land reforms driven by political popularity confiscated white-owned farms to redistribute them among his cronies, completely destroying the agricultural foundation. The unauthorized printing of currency to cover fiscal deficits led to one of the worst hyperinflations in human history and the ruin of the nation. The Souphanouvong and Pathet Lao regime Laos, which had previously maintained a constitutional monarchy with Western backing, transformed into a socialist state when the Patheti Lao, a leftist communist guerrilla force, seized power. Following the regime change, the existing government forces were largely disbanded or sent to re-education camps, and the guerrilla organization became the backbone of the national military. Under a one-party dictatorship, the regime pushed for the abolition of private property and collective farming. However, the exile of the elite class and a collapse in productivity have kept the nation stagnant as one of the world's least developed countries to this day. Part 3. South Korea's current security landscape and political debates. The lesson of history is clear. Seizing control of the military and security apparatus for political ends leads to institutional collapse and economic ruin. Now we must turn our gaze to the reality facing South Korea. South Korea grew from one of the world's poorest nations into an economic powerhouse, leading advanced industries, all on the foundation of a robust ROQ alliance and security framework. This proved that a rock-solid security posture is the ultimate prerequisite for prosperity. Recently, however, an unprecedented political battle has been raging over the operational mechanisms of our military organizations. This conflict can be summarized into 3 core battlegrounds: massive personnel, reshuffles, and investigations. Critics worry that large-scale shakeups at the top, brass and investigations into certain military officials, could undermine internal cohesion, weaken the chain of command, and create a security vacuum. On the other hand, proponents argue that this is a necessary process to eradicate deep-seated corruption within the military and establish the rule of law, emergency martial law responses, and ministerial appointments. Critics point to the dangerous risk of the military being weaponized as a tool for political conflict, which threatens constitutional values. Conversely, defenders counter that these are legitimate acts of governance, in accordance with the Constitution and laws, serving as an opportunity to solidify democratic civilian control. Relocation of the Korea Military Academy and defense reorganization. Military veterans are voicing deep concerns that the historical legitimacy and credibility of the armed forces could be compromised. Meanwhile, the government maintains that this is a macro policy review aimed at maximizing the efficiency of defense infrastructure, leaving the two sides on parallel lines that never meet. Compounding these issues as social conflict widens, unverified fake news and rumors concerning law enforcement are spreading rapidly across YouTube. Because the fragmentation of information paralyzes rational public discourse, a mature civic consciousness, one that seeks to verify facts with a balanced perspective, is more urgently needed than ever. Conclusion: the interdependence of security and the economy. The fundamental truth we must never overlook is that security and the economy are two sides of the same coin. A strong national security posture provides the foundation for a stable economy, and maintaining trusted international relationships is essential to sustaining national competitiveness. Currently, our economy is fighting through multiple headwinds, including rising exchange rate volatility and shifting global supply chains. Notably, the U.S. government and Congress continue to express concerns that some of South Korea's digital regulations and competition policies might discriminate against American companies, emerging as a major variable in future ROK-US economic relations. Ultimately, a society that gets bogged down in partisan, political logic and weaponizes its foundational security system cannot move toward the future. What we need is cold, hard reason to judge the national interest, based strictly on objective data and historical facts. How do you view South Korea's current security policies and the rapidly changing international landscape? Please feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments below. In our next video, we will use detailed data to analyze the ripple effects that shifts in U.S. trade policy will have on our economy and industries. If you found this video informative, please subscribe, like, set notifications, and share it with those around you. Thank you for watching.